Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday. It's November 25th. Today is day 416 since the attacks by Hamas on October 7th of last year. A summary of things that have happened over the last 24 hours on this 416th day of war. These are from Haaretz at the end of the day in Israel today on Monday. The U.S. has informed Lebanese officials that a ceasefire with Israel could be announced within hours. U.S. President Biden and French President Macron are reportedly set to announce the 60-day ceasefire on Tuesday. Israel's security cabinet is set to convene to discuss the ceasefire agreement with Lebanon tomorrow. So there's more to hear about that. Italy's foreign minister said that G7 countries are formulating a unified position in response to the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant, particularly that which was issued for Prime Minister Netanyahu. And the Israeli Defense Forces struck 4 Hezbollah military headquarters in Beirut's Dahiya, in the south, as well as 25 command centers in Lebanon associated with Hezbollah's executive council. That is according to the Israeli Defense Forces reports. Human Rights Watch said that an October 25th Israeli airstrike in Lebanon that killed 3 journalists and wounded others was most likely a deliberate attack on civilians and an apparent war crime. So that's a quick update on the last 24 hours, some more detailed updates of some of the things that happened over the weekend that I didn't necessarily give updates about. The director of Northern Gaza's Kamal Adwan Hospital was injured in an attack on the facility on Saturday. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, 12 other healthcare workers were also injured on Friday as the hospital came under attack. The Israeli military issued fresh evacuation orders in areas of an eastern Gaza suburb, Gaza City suburb in the north, setting off a new wave of additional displacements of people in Gaza. Israeli airstrikes on central Gaza killed at least 10 Palestinians between Saturday night and subsequent days, health officials said. A female Israeli hostage was reportedly killed in the area of northern Gaza, an area that was struck by Israeli forces. A Hamas spokesperson announced that her death was the fault of the Israeli strikes. That was reported over the weekend on Saturday. Israel has said that they are investigating that claim. A senior Israeli minister said that Israel will stay in Gaza, quote, for years, The Guardian reported. Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank are allegedly adopting tactics similar to those that have been deployed in Gaza. The Israeli forces are now using airstrikes in the West Bank, and there also are reports that people are being used as human shields by the Israeli military, the New York Times reported. The Biden administration has warned Israel that its decision to stop issuing administrative detention orders against West Bank Israeli settlers suspected of attacking Palestinians will increase violence in the territory. I talked about this report in the last couple of days. There are thousands of Palestinians currently being held under administrative detention. That means there's no due process. They don't have charges brought against them. But the Israeli government has said that will no longer be applied to Israeli settlers. The Defense Ministry said the decision was an internal step taken out of commitment to, quote, democratic principles, end quote. In Lebanon, as I mentioned, Israeli leaders are set to convene tomorrow to discuss a ceasefire deal. According to Israeli officials, reports indicate that Israel and Lebanon are nearing a ceasefire agreement that would end the Israel-Hezbollah war. That's according to Israeli and U.S. officials. Axios reported. The outline of the agreement is a 2-month ceasefire to start, so 60 days of a ceasefire. The fighting would end. Israeli forces would withdraw from Lebanon. Hezbollah would end its armed presence along the south border and the border south of the Litani River. These withdrawals would be accompanied by an influx of thousands of Lebanese army troops who in large part have not been engaged in the war. And they would patrol the border alongside of existing UN peacekeeping forces. That's UNIFIL, amongst other UN peacekeepers. An international committee would be set up to monitor the implementation of the ceasefire agreement and that of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701. That was the UN resolution that was passed in 2006 at the end of the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in the 2006 war. It was never fully implemented. Hezbollah never fully ended its presence in South Lebanon, while Lebanon has said that Israel regularly violated its airspace and occupied small patches of its territory. Intense negotiations over the past week brought Israel and Hezbollah closer together to an agreement, but there's not a finalized agreement as of yet. The biggest sticking point is whether or not Israel will be allowed to continue striking targets in Lebanon that it considers a threat. So we will see what tomorrow brings. The death toll, according to the Associated Press, as of a few hours ago, it's now about 4 o'clock on the East Coast on Monday, was that more than 3,500 people in Lebanon have been killed, many of them civilians, since October of last year. And more than 70 people have been killed in Israel, over 40 of them being civilians. In addition, over 50 Israeli soldiers have been killed in the ground offensive. Hezbollah yesterday fired some 250 projectiles into Israel, one of the group's largest attacks since the start of the war, and Israel responded with conducting heavy airstrikes on the southern outskirts of Beirut. The exchange came after an Israeli strike on a residential building in Beirut that killed 29 people. An Israeli airstrike on the Lebanese army center killed at least one soldier and injured 18 more. Separately, 4 Italian soldiers were slightly injured after 2 rockets exploded at a UNIFIL peacekeeping force in South Lebanon. Again, that was over the weekend. Iran has spoken up again and has said that they are preparing to respond to Israel. A senior advisor to the country's supreme leader said in an interview that was published over the weekend, and Iran started activating, quote, new advanced centrifuges in response to the UN nuclear watchdog's rebuke, the country's foreign ministry said on Friday. It was announced yesterday that the body of the missing rabbi, Israeli Moldovan rabbi in the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, was found. He had been killed in what was described as a heinous anti-Semitic terror incident. The UAE's Interior Ministry later said authorities arrested 3 suspects involved in the killing of Rabbi Zvi Kogan. The Israeli government said that the killing was determined to be a terror attack. They did not offer any additional details. The White House condemned the incident and said this was a horrific crime against all who stand for peace, tolerance, and coexistence. It was an assault as well on the UAE and its rejection of violent extremism across the board. If you'd like more background on Chabad, as Zvi Kogan was a Chabad rabbi, I would encourage you to listen to the update that I did for Saturday of this weekend. There has been quite a resounding response to the news of that killing in the UAE. In addition, there continue to be attacks across Gaza. The situation there continues to be utterly devastating. So may we just be encouraged to not give up in our efforts of speaking truth, of advocating with our elected officials, of praying for peace, and working toward that end. May God go before us.